All right, y'all, this is going to be a fun episode. I've been wanting to do this and I'm finally finding some time. This is going to be a little bit time involved. I've never made these before. I am doing a recipe from a cookbook that belonged to my great grandmother. It was for her wood cook stove. This was a cookbook that was apparently given to all the proud new owners of the Home Comfort wood cook stove. And this is a recipe in that cookbook for cinnamon rolls. Now, just to let me give you a little bit of history. The cookbook itself, the latest date in the cookbook is 1930. So she must have gotten this stove in 1930. However, the company had been around since 1864. So recipes in the cookbook went back to 1864, which is pretty amazing. I'm not sure exactly what year this particular recipe was written, but we can guess this recipe is definitely from the 1800s because it seems like the cookbook was just a reprint. Each year they would add the new models of the stoves that had come out, and then they would add perhaps some new recipes, some fancy recipes. But a cinnamon roll recipe certainly seems very traditional. So this one is going to be fun. Stick with me. We'll get right to it. All right, so the first step in this recipe, it says and I've got the recipe, I printed it out. What I have is, as you saw earlier, I have photographs from the cookbook. So I took pictures of every single page in the cookbook, and I just went ahead and printed out the page that had this. I printed out this section of this page because I wanted to make sure I would be able to read it easily. So it says, dissolve 1 cake of compressed yeast in 1/4 cup of warm water. Add 1 cup of scalded milk and 1½ cups of flour. So the scalded milk thing, you don't actually have to scald milk anymore, because the reason why they would do it a long time ago was because milk wasn't pasteurized. And scalding the milk meant heating it warm enough so that it would kill any of the bacteria and enzymes in the milk that might prevent thickening, so that the dough wouldn't be able to do what it needed to do. So they would scald it to basically denature the milk and make it so it would let the yeast do its thing the way it needed to. So all I've done is I've just warmed the milk. I'm not needing to actually scald it, and you don't actually need to scald your milk either. So I'm going to go ahead and and when it says 1 cake of compressed yeast, what it's talking about is the same quantity as you would find in a packet of yeast, and a packet of yeast is 2¼ teaspoons. So I'm just going to start, and to keep things old-fashioned, I'm going to see if I can't mix all of this in my bread bowl. This is definitely old school. There's 2 and about 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. So that's about 2¼ teaspoons of yeast. I'm going to add 1/4 cup of warm water. All right, so I've got 1/4 cup of warm water. And I'm going to tell you also, there's another couple of things about this recipe that's kind of interesting. One is I'm going to be baking this recipe in a moderate oven. So you weren't going to get a super precise temperature with an old wood stove, so they would say a moderate oven. I asked my mom about it. She said she thinks that probably means about 350 degrees. We're going to find out, though. And as for the flour, there's a part where it'll say add flour to make a good dough. It doesn't say how much. It just says add flour. It does say in this first part to add 1½ cups of flour. So I am going to do that. In fact, I'm going to do that now before I add the milk. And like I say, I didn't bring this to a boil. I just got the milk warmed up. And the main reason why I even warmed it was just so that it would help the dough rise faster. whoops. I get so many comments about this wooden bread bowl, and people ask me where I get it from, and I got this from my mother. My mother gave me this, but this is a very traditional Eastern North Carolina thing. This bowl is made out of tupelo wood, and they used to carve them, and everybody had one. This is what we would use to make biscuits in, and they're just wonderful, but you can't get them anymore. If you can if you can find someone who does wood carving, if they can get some tupelo wood, they can probably make one. If you do find somebody who sells something like this online, that's a true tupelo bread bowl, you're going to pay a lot for it. They're very expensive. But I love mine. I'm so thankful to have it. All right, I think that's pretty well mixed. So let's see what this recipe says. It says, set it in a warm place to rise. And then when it says, when light, add 1/4 of a cup of sugar, 1/4 of a cup shortening. I'm not going to use shortening, y'all. I'm going to use butter. And 2 beaten egg yolks, 1 teaspoon of salt, and enough flour to form a dough. So I guess the trick now is going to be just for me to just let this be for a little while and let this start to rise. And then once this starts to rise, I'll bring you back and we'll move on to the next step. All right. I was rereading the recipe. This has been sitting for a little while. I'm starting to see bubbles form in the dough, and it's definitely gotten puffier. So I'm going to go ahead and start adding the other ingredients that it tells me to add, because it's still going to have to rise again after I've kneaded the dough and gotten it ready before I roll it out and make the rolls. So I'm just going to go ahead and start adding the other ingredients now. So it says, to what I have here, I'm going to add 1/4 of a cup of sugar. This is a 1/8 cup measuring cup, so I'm just going to do 2 of these. So this is 1/4 of a cup of sugar. It says 2 beaten egg yolks. I went ahead and separated a couple of eggs, and I've beaten the yolks. I'll go ahead and actually start mixing that in a little bit. And it says to add 1/4 of a cup of shortening, but like I mentioned, I don't use shortening. I'm just going to use butter. So I have actually melted 1/4 of a cup of butter, and I'm going to add that in. Let me make sure it's not too hot. No, I think that's fine. So I'm just going to add that in. Get this all mixed in. And then once this is all mixed in, then it says add a teaspoon of salt and enough flour to form a dough. So this is going to be a nice rich dough. I can already tell. I'm so excited about this. I'm measuring my salt. And it says a teaspoon of salt. And you know what? I'll probably use just a little bit less than a teaspoon because I use salted butter. And so I think a little less than a teaspoon will probably be fine. Get this all mixed in. This is going to be the fun part because it just says add enough flour to form a dough. Work together and knead until smooth and elastic. So what does it mean to add enough flour to form a dough? I'm so used to working with things that I either just know how much flour to add because I've made them so many times, or things that have a specific amount. So we're going to find out what it means to just add flour until it forms a dough. I'm going to just start by adding, I don't know, that's probably about 1/4 of a cup of flour. Oh, I think I'm going to definitely need more than that. I'm going to go ahead and add about 1/2 cup. So now I've added about 3/4 of a cup of flour. And it's looking better, but I can tell I'm still going to need to add more because I don't think this is supposed to be such a wet dough. I'm going to keep mixing it though, just to make sure. I don't want to assume I need to add a bunch more and then find out that I don't. I'm going to add about another 1/4 of a cup. And so then this will put me at adding, having added a full cup from when I started the recipe. Now see, now we're getting there. So this would put the total amount of flour in the recipe at 2.5 cups. It's still kind of wet though. So that's 2.5 cups. Let me add another 1/4 cup. I bet this is going to do it. So this will put it at a total of 2 3/4 of a cup of flour. I don't know, y'all. Still seems kind of wet and sticky. So I feel like I might need to add, because there's no way I can start kneading that. I'm going to add another 1/4 cup, and that'll put us at a total of 3 cups of flour. Okay. All right, so 3 cups of flour it is. This dough is definitely going to be something that I can knead, and then once I have kneaded the dough and gotten it so that it's smooth and elastic, then I'll be letting it sit in a warm place to rise, and then once it's risen, it'll be ready to form into the cinnamon rolls. So I'm just going to keep working on this. This is a nice, soft, pillowy dough. I really like the feel of it. So this is not a dense dough like you would have a bread dough. This is definitely a more pillowy dough. Let me get some of this dough off my fingers. Okay. Just get just a tiny bit more so I can work this. There we go. I'm just going ahead and putting out a piece of parchment paper, so that way once it is done rising, I'll be able to just take it off the parchment paper and transfer it to a tea towel, which is what I'm going to use for rolling it up. Let me get this dough out of the bowl. Actually, I'm going to put a little bit of flour on the surface there. It's already pretty pliable. It didn't even take that much kneading to get it here, but it is definitely already pretty pliable. So I'm going to leave this here and just let this rise. And then when it's ready, I'll bring you back. All right. Well, I think we can say that this has risen. I've pressed it in and it's just slowly coming up. It's not coming up fast, which tells me the dough is ready. So let's see what the next step says. Let's see. It says, okay, so it's doubled in bulk. It says turn onto floured board, roll out in a sheet, spread with 4 tablespoons soft butter or shortening. Sprinkle with a little sugar and cinnamon and roll up as a jelly roll. Okay, so I have my board, but I'm actually going to be rolling it out on a tea towel because I like to use that for rolling it up. I think that will work well. So let me move this over here for just a minute. Spread this out. I'm going to put a little bit of flour on that. Just a little bit of flour on this and a little bit of flour on my rolling pin. I'm going to turn that out right there, just like that. And so I would say this is ready to roll out. And I'm just rolling it out into a rectangle because I'll be spreading this with the butter and with the cinnamon sugar mixture. And then once it's rolled out, I'm going to be cutting it into the actual cinnamon rolls. And we'll go from there. Okay. And if you need to shape some of these a little bit by just pulling the dough, you can certainly do that. That's fine. All right, there we go. Now, all right, so now I need to spread this with some butter. And so I just have some butter, and I've kind of just gotten it soft and a little bit melty here. So I'm just going to spread this on. And this is the other half of that stick of butter that I used in the dough. This recipe gets a lot of butter, y'all. It gets a stick in the cinnamon roll dough, and then it gets another 2 to 3 tablespoons in the pan, which is where it's going to make the brown sugar glaze at the bottom. So with all this butter, you know it's going to be good. I am a big fan of butter. If you watch my channel, you know I love some butter. Okay, I think that's actually good enough. So there we go. All right, trying to get this all nice and up here on the board. All right, there we go. Now let's see. I'm gonna just use my cinnamon sugar shaker because it says sprinkle some sugar and some cinnamon on top. And I keep this shaker full of cinnamon sugar. And so that's just what I'm going to use because it's what I need. I think that looks pretty good. What about y'all? I think that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit more over here. There we go. Alrighty. So now that I've done that, it says, roll it up as a jelly roll and cut into sections an inch or more in thickness. All right, so this will be the fun part. This is why I like to use the tea towel, because the tea towel can help keep it neat while I roll it up. And it can roll it all at once rather than me having to do one end and then the other end and then the other end and so forth. There we go. All right, so now I have my long cinnamon roll, and I'm going to cut this into, it says it'll make about 18 rolls, so I guess I'll cut it in half, and then I'll cut it into thirds, and I'll cut it into thirds again, and I'm going to show y'all how I do that. All right, I had to find my string. I just use string for this. So I've just cut myself a little length of string, and let me get this so you can see. So then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end of this. Actually, I'm going to cut me a longer length of string. I cut that one kind of short. So I am going to come down here about halfway. And after I do this first one like this, then I'll be getting it from underneath. All right. Okay, so now I've got those two. So each of these will get done into thirds and then thirds again. So let me get this about. See how that is? It's like you just wrap it right around the roll, and then that will cut it nice and straight without crushing the roll. This is supposed to be in a third. Here I was about to do it in half. I got to reposition that a little bit. So there's one. Two. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, I need to be thinking about what I'm doing, y'all. Okay, so I got to get this butter spread out in this pan. And I also have got to spread some brown sugar in here. Let's see. See, I've not done these before, so you get to see me stumbling along as I do it. It probably would have been good if I went ahead and just melted this butter in here, but I've got it lined with parchment and I don't want it to leak out or anything. I was kind of surprised when I was starting to make this recipe. I was actually talking about the recipe with my mom, and I was asking her if she had any confectioner sugar because I hadn't read the recipe real closely yet. And I was thinking I would need it to do like an icing to go on top. But then I read that you put brown sugar in the bottom of the pan with butter, and that makes a glaze. And so I said, okay, well, these aren't going to need icing, because what will happen is they'll get baked and then I'll turn them out. And then the glaze, the brown sugar glaze will be on top, and that's going to be kind of like sticky buns. So that's going to be good. Are y'all able? I don't know what y'all can see. See what I've done? I've got this with butter. And so now I'm just going to sprinkle some brown sugar. I got to reposition this so y'all can actually see what I'm doing. There we go. And it says to sprinkle about 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. So this is probably about a half a cup. Not quite a half a cup. That's probably got it. That's going to be good, y'all. All right. So now I can start putting these rolls that I made in the pan. And they're going to just hang out in there until they rise again. So let me just keep cutting these into thirds. You can tell I don't do this all the time, because I'm sure if I did this all the time, I'd be so quick with it. I've made cinnamon rolls several times before, but never this recipe. So this is new for me. Let's see. Oh, it's attached, no wonder. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to do this one in thirds. That's not really thirds, is it, y'all? Well, you can't accuse me of being great at math. That's all right. I'll get it sorted out. Y'all, I have more cinnamon roll dough than I have space in my pan. I think I was supposed to get 1, 2, 3, and then 6. Let's see. You think I can tighten? I'm going to try to tighten these up a little bit. I don't know how that's going to work. We're going to find out. Because it says an 8x10 pan. This is an 8x10 pan. Even if I just have to make it into... We'll see. We'll see. This is funny. We'll see how I do it. We'll see. Okay. All right, so this end of the pan is just going to be kind of crowded down here. But that's okay. Because really, I mean, you look at those, and do you think those are not going to taste good, even if they're not even if they're different sizes and shapes? The trick's going to be just making sure they all bake evenly. That fat one right there is going to take longer, and I can't help it. It is what it is. So now that the oven's heated, these are in the pan. I just need to wait for them to, let's see, does it say? It says to let them set aside to rise or to become light. So I guess this is just that second rise. Well, I guess it's a third rise, but I'm just going to let these rise until they're kind of puffy again, and then I'll pop them in the oven. So I'll bring you back when they're ready to go in the oven. All right, y'all. I think you would probably agree that these have puffed up nicely. They've definitely filled up the pan really, really tight. So it's going to be interesting to see how these bake up. Probably if I had cut them a little bit thicker, I wouldn't have as many of them as in the pan. They'd fit better. But anyway, these are going to be delicious. I can just tell. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these in the oven. The oven is, it said in the instructions, bake them in a moderate oven. Of course, with, like I said, a wood burning stove, you wouldn't know the precise temperature. Of course, with these modern ovens, I think sometimes the temperature is off anyway, but I digress. If you were going to bake these in a glass pan, you probably would want it warmer, like 375 or something. But I'm going to bake these at 350, and I'm going to guess I'm probably going to check in on them. Well, I'll probably check in on them after 15 minutes or so. They might bake 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Who knows? We'll find out. Anyway, I'm going to pop these in the oven now. I cannot wait to show you these because I've been looking at these in the oven with their I've been looking at these in the oven and they are really going kind of crazy. Look at that, y'all. They are huge. I mean, they blew up out of this pan. Can you see? Let me see. Look at some of these. These things are massive. They just climbed out of the pan. They're just like, this isn't enough space for us. We've got to just climb out of this pan. How I'm going to turn these over to enjoy the glaze that's supposed to be on the bottom, on the top, well, we're going to find out because I don't know. We're going to see how it goes. I got to get my little cooling rack. I think I'll use this. What do y'all think? I'm not even sure how I'm going to do this. I guess I'll put this maybe on top here and just, let's see. This is real stuff, y'all. This is just real. I'm not even going to pretend I'm an expert and know what I'm doing here because I've never done this before. But let's see. I'm kind of scared. I don't know how these are going to turn out. Let's see. I hope they're done all the way. I think they are, but I think the glaze is sticking to that paper. So there they are. There they are. So honestly, the sugar glaze doesn't seem really totally melted. I'm not sure if maybe I should pop this back in the oven for a couple of minutes to see if I can get the glaze to melt the rest of the way. I think I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that and then I'll bring you back. All right, so what I've done is I actually ended up putting them under the broiler for a minute, and let me just let you see. See? So that's all bubbling. I think that's probably going to be as good as it gets. I don't want it to burn, so I'm going to go ahead, I think, and take these out. They actually look pretty good, y'all. Look at that. That's a brown sugar and butter glaze that's just melted all over it was the bottoms, but now it's the top of them. So I'm going to separate these and serve a couple up, and I'll show you how they look. I'm going to have one for me and one for my mom. My son is staying at a friend's house tonight, so he'll miss it tonight, but he'll get to have one tomorrow. Look at that. They come apart so nice. I think this is that end where they were like all smushed together. Let's see, let me get one from over here. There we go. So there's a couple. Let's see. See how they turned out? Let me show you up close. They're kind of a funky shape, but that's because they were all smushed together in the pan. And I did my best, but the thing is now I know how these are supposed to bake, and they need more space, or they at least need to be cut in a more consistent shape. And I know that. I mean, really, cinnamon rolls should be like that anyway. But since these are going to be flipped over and the whole 9 yards, these just can't be any which way because of a glaze being poured. I mean, a frosting being put on top. So anyway, I think these are going to be good. I'm going to taste this and see. I'm going to let you know. Look at that. Let me see. Can you see that? Look at that. That is really good, y'all. These are very pillowy. They're very pillowy. They're very, very soft. Of course, they're nothing like store-bought refrigerated cinnamon rolls. One thing I think I would change is this recipe is perfect, except I should have followed it exactly. Remember when I added the salt and I said, well, I'm using salted butter, so maybe I should cut back a little tiny bit on the salt, so I didn't put a full teaspoon in. I probably should have gone ahead and put in a full teaspoon. Also, I think if I make these again, I think I'm not going to do the brown sugar on the bottom. I think instead I'm going to just bake these like normal cinnamon rolls and then do a powdered sugar glaze on top, because that's what I like. I like that best. So anyway, I'm still glad I tried this recipe. There's so many recipes in that cookbook that I can't wait to try, and I got something out of it, because absolutely I will make these again. I'm just going to make the tweaks that I just described. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll let you know what my mom thinks, because I'm going to get another one of these. Well, I'm going to take this one up to her and see what she thinks. And so let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.